Hi friends! Today we're jumping into a new unit in math. Our first lesson in this unit is about arrays and the distributive property. Now, we used arrays earlier this year in math, right? When we were talking about multiplication. But the distributive property is a little bit new for us. So we're going to dive right in so we can learn what it's all about. So on our video agenda today, we are going to watch a Khan Academy video together. We'll do a guided practice example problem, and then you'll do your independent practice and your exit ticket. So how many steps do you have to take after watching this video? Two, right. You need to do your independent practice and your exit ticket. Don't forget to do both. All right. So what is the distributive property, right? What is this mysterious property that was in our lesson title? And how is it going to help us to multiply?
What we're going to do in this video is dig a little bit deeper into our understanding of multiplication. And just as an example, we're going to use 4 times 7. And some of you might know what 4 times 7 is, but even in this case, I think you might get something from this video, because we're going to think about how you can break down a multiplication question into simpler parts. And that's going to be useful well beyond 4 times 7. It's going to be useful in your future when you're tackling more and more complicated things.
So if you think about like when you're in 4th grade, right? What if you have to solve a multiplication problem like 14 times 4, right? Or 30 times 7. You might not know how to do that in your brain because that's not one of the multiplication facts that we've memorized. But you can use the distributive property to help you figure it out.
Now there's a couple of ways that we can visualize 4 times 7.
Remember, what does visualize mean? It means I'm making a picture in my mind, right?
My favorite way is to visualize it with angry cats. So let's bring on the angry cats. Yep, they're still angry. And we can see that this is a representation of 4 times 7. We have 4 rows right over here. 4 rows. And each of those rows have 7 cats. So you can see that right over here. Each of those rows have 7 cats. Some people would call this a 4 by 7 grid or 4 by 7 array, however you'd want to view it. But if someone were to ask you what's the total number of cats, it would be 4 rows times 7 columns. 4 times 7. Now another way to represent 4 times 7 is also with a tape diagram. You might see something like this, where here we're visualizing it as 7 4s, or you could view it as 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. Now that's all well and good, and you can add that up if you like. But what I promised you is that we would figure out ways to break down things that might simplify things in the future. Well, what if you didn't know what 4 times 7 is, but you knew what 4 times 5 is, and you knew what 4 times 2 is? Well, what's interesting is that 7 is 5 plus 2.
Notice here that he's choosing to break up the 7 on this side instead of the 4. Why do you think he did that? Maybe you would start your sentence by saying something like, I think he chose to break up 7 instead of 4 because... If you need to pause the video to take a second and think, that's totally okay. I think he chose to break up the 7 instead of the 4 because 7 is the bigger factor. Remember, a factor is one of the numbers that we are multiplying to get our product, which is our answer in multiplication, right? So I think that he chose to break up the 7 because it is the bigger factor, right? So if we were doing a problem like 4 times 14, I think I mentioned before, I would want to break up the 14 because it's the bigger factor, and that's the one that's making it a little bit more tricky for me to multiply.
So what if we tried to first figure out this many cats? So 4 rows and 5 columns right over there. And then we tried to figure out this many cats, 4 rows and 2 columns. And you can see that it's the exact same number of cats. So one way to think about it is 4 times 7 is the exact same thing as 4 times, and I'm going to use parentheses, and that just means to do that part first, is equal to 4 times. Instead of 7, I could write that as 5 plus 2, because that's what 7 is. So all this is saying is 4 times 7 is the same thing as 4 times 5 plus 2.
Again, notice how even though he wrote out the equation differently and he broke up that 7 into 5 plus 2, the total number of cats did not change, right? We didn't add any cats, we didn't take away any cats. Even though we broke up this 7, the total number of cats still stayed the same.
The 5 plus 2 first because we have those parentheses around it, and 5 plus 2 is indeed equal to 7, and we can see that that is equivalent to the total number of cats that we have here, which we could view as what we just circled off in this orangish pink color, which would be 4 rows of 5, so that would be equal to 4 times 5.
He forgot to say in each, right? 4 times 5 in each, right? It's important to note. Each row has 5.
4 times 5. And then to that, we can add this second group of cat heads or angry cat heads, and that is 4 rows of 2. So that's 4 times 2. And we could put parentheses if we want, just to make it a little bit more readable. Now, why did I do that? Well, some folks might find 4 times 5 a little bit more straightforward. I could skip count by 5. I can go 5, 10, 15, 20. Also, 4 times 2 might be a little bit more straightforward. And so it could be easier to say, hey, this is just going to be 4 times 5, which is 20, plus 4 times 2, which is equal to 8. And so that is just going to be equal to 28. And you could have thought about it the same way down here with what is sometimes called a tape diagram. We could say, all right, if I have 5 4s, that's this amount right over here. That is the 4 times the 5. And then I could add that to the 2 4s, the 4 times the 2 right over here. And that's another way to get to 4 times 7. So the big picture here is, even if you're not dealing with 4 times 7, even if you're not dealing with angry cats, and in most of our lives we actually try to avoid angry cats, there might be a way to break down the numbers that you're multiplying into ones that you might be more familiar with. I'll give you one more example.
Before he jumps into the next example, I just want to make sure we're clear on what we're doing when we talk about distributive property, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm going to distribute my 4 across the parts of the 7, right? So I'm going to distribute this 4 across the 2 sections that he made in this, out of this bigger array. So what he did from this step to this step is he went 4 times 5, and he put that in its own set of parentheses or its own bubble, which tells us what to do first. Then he went back to the 4 and he said, can't forget about the 2, 4 times 2. He put that in its own little bubble. And then we just put them together, right? So you take that first number, 4 times 5, and we add that to 4 times 2, okay? It's important to note that the length here didn't change, and neither did the width, right? We just broke it up. All right, time for you to try.
Let's say someone were to ask you, well, what is 6 times 9? Pause this video and see if you can break this down in some useful way.
Okay, so I have 6 times 9 over here, right? I want you to try to figure out what would we put in place of these question marks, right? I'm going to keep my 6, pretend that's my length, or my rows. How can I break down that 9 to make this a little bit easier? Go ahead, pause the video, take as much time as you need to think, and then come back when you're ready. Welcome back. Hopefully you were able to try this out, and let's go over it together. So if I wanted to break down 9, the easiest way that it seems for me to do that might be to do 5 plus 4. Let's try that. Now I'm going to distribute my 6 across these parentheses, right? I'm imagining in my mind and visualizing that this was the width going across, and then I split it into 5 columns and 4 columns, okay? So let's do 6 times, first number is 5. 6 times 5, and then in my second set of parentheses, I would go back to my 6. 6 times, what's the other part of that width, or the other part of my columns? 4. 6 times 4. All right, and then I have to put them together, right? So I have my addition in the middle, and then I can solve. So 6 times 5, I know, is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Oof, good thing we reviewed those rolling numbers last week. Plus 6 times 4. 6, 12, 18, 24. Okay, and then some quick addition in my brain. 30 plus 24 is 54. All right, and I can double check by going back. Oh, yep, I know that 6 times 9, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. And the spider says 42, 48, 54. Perfect. Now it's time for our guided practice. Look at the array below. Write the multiplication equation that you would use to find the area of this array. Use the distributive property to divide the array and create 2 smaller multiplication facts. Okay, so before we jump into this problem, I want to make sure that we understand what we are given here for information and what we need to do, what we need to find, right? So in the problems from the video, we were asked to find or to create a drawing, right? We were given a multiplication equation, and we were asked to create a drawing and then use the distributive property. But in this problem, take a second to read it again, and then I'm going to have you turn and talk. Tell a stuffed animal, a pet, a sibling, or family member. In this problem, we are given what? What information did they give us in the problem? And then we are asked to write what do we need to provide in order to solve this? Go ahead, pause the video, do your turn and talk. All right, so in this problem, we are given, well, it looks to me that we're given an array, right? We're given an array or a picture, right, with rows and columns. And we are asked to write it says write the multiplication equation, right? So we are given an array, and we are asked to write the multiplication equation. Then we can use the distributive property to break up our array and create the smaller multiplication facts to help us solve. So in order to do that, I'm going to need to jump into my drawing tool here to make sure that I can show you how I'm going to split this up, okay? So first things first, we have to write the multiplication equation. This still says number sentence. I like saying multiplication equation better because I think it's a little bit more specific. Okay, so first thing I need to do is count up what would be my original dimensions, my original length and width, or my original rows and columns. Well, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows times how many columns? Turn and tell your family member or your dog or your cat or your stuffed animal. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. Good. Okay, what if I don't know 5 times 6, right? What if I forgot that one? How can I break it up so that it's easier to solve? Okay, so first I'm going to use my visualizing to break it up. So let's add a shape here. Okay. So I'm not going to change my length here. I'm just going to break up my width. What would be a good way to break this up? Well, I know 5 times 3, right? So maybe what if I broke this up into 3 and let's do another 3. Move this over a little bit. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to change the color on this one. Let's make it purple. Okay, so now I've split up my 6 into 3 and 3. So my length did not change at all, but my width, 6, got broken up into 3 and 3. Okay, so what I'm showing in this middle step here is that no matter how I break up this width, right, I'm still multiplying by the same length, right? So even though I broke up 6 into 3 plus 3, I'm still multiplying that 3 plus 3 times 5, okay? So now I'm going to break this down even more, right? So I'm going to say 5 times 3, which is showing the area of this box. Let me make this red so you can see. And then this is for the purple section. Okay, so here I'm showing the area of the red box by showing 5 times 3. And then here I'm going to show the area of the purple box by showing 5 times 3 as well. And now I can solve it out. And looks like 5 times 3 is 15, plus 5 times 3 is 15. And what's 15 plus 15, friends? It is 30. Good job using your mental math. Okay. Before I move on, I thought of one more thing I want to remind you of. Here, I broke down the 6. Why did I break down the 6? Because it's the bigger factor, right? I'm trying to simplify by breaking it up. Okay. Now that we've done our guided practice, it's time for you to do your independent practice. Woohoo! So, today's independent practice is on Khan Academy. You're going to go back to today's assignment on Google Classroom. If you're in BC, you're going to check the Scholar Logins Google Sheet to make sure that you know your Khan Academy login information. If you are in UCLA or Louisiana and you don't know your Khan Academy login information, that's okay. Just reach out to your teacher before doing anything else. Step number 3 is very important. Once you know your login information, you are going to click the Khan link that says Visualize Distributive Property. Then, once you get to that page, you need to click Log in the top right corner and use that login information from step 2. Okay? If you don't log in, your teacher is not going to know that you did the work. Okay? So it's really, really important that you click Log in. What are you clicking? Log in. Good job. Complete the 4 questions once you are logged in. And once you have completed the 4 questions, you don't need to press any sort of like submit button or anything like that. It saves it automatically, and as long as you're logged in, it will tell your teacher that you've done it. Then you're going to go back to today's assignment on Google Classroom. You are going to click on the exit ticket, arrays, and distributive property. It's a Google form. Most of us are familiar with this at this point. You're going to complete the activities, click submit at the bottom. If you click back into the exit ticket after you press submit, you're not going to be able to see your answers. It doesn't save them the way that Google Doc does so that you can see them. But don't worry, your teacher got the information as soon as you press submit, right? So please only submit it one time. If you made a mistake, totally okay, just reach out to your teacher. Also, one more thing to note, make sure that when you're done with all of this, I forgot a step 4. Go back to Google Classroom and click Turn In, okay? Once you are done with your independent practice and your exit ticket, that's when you press Turn In. What do you need to complete before pressing Turn In? Our independent practice and our exit ticket. It's like I can hear you from your homes. Good job, friends. All right, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you soon.